You're listening to Health Coach Conversations, a podcast where our conversations help health coaches all around the world to level up our businesses and to get more clients. Hello and welcome. Today I'm visiting with Jiordana Saade. Jiordana is a clinical nutritionist, hypnotherapist, and an expert in eating behavior. She runs a vibrant practice that focuses on the connection between mental health and nutrition and our relationship with food. Jiordana works with women all over the world using her signature program called the Mindful Method to help facilitate permanent changes around eating behaviors and reprogram the nervous system to end self-sabotage. Jiordana focuses on the brain-body connection and believes if the body is holding on to weight, there are imbalances in both mental state and the physiological body. Jiordana helps clients to recover their mental and physical health through the use of holistic nutrition, functional medicine, hypnotherapy, and behavioral psychology. Today, we'll be talking about how to reprogram the mind for lasting weight loss and improved health, the secret behind stubborn weight and what no one is talking about, and how to achieve optimized health while still enjoying your favorite foods. So can you tell us about how your journey into specializing into food psychology came to be?
Absolutely. So, I think where most stories begin is right at the very beginning. So, I was obese as a child, and at that time obesity rates were very low, and I was the only obese kid in class. And so, as you can imagine, I was bullied and I felt very different from everybody else. And when I was 8 years old, I had a crush on a boy and I was playing tag and I tagged him. And in front of the whole school, he yelled, "Fatty caught me." And I was mortified. And so at 8 years old, I decided enough was enough. And I went on my first diet. And I had no idea of what a diet really meant. I just knew that the more I ate, the bigger I got. And so I essentially starved myself and I lost quite a bit of weight for an 8-year-old. And the problem is I received a ton of validation. So people around me all of a sudden wanted to be my friend. My parents were like, "Oh, look how beautiful you're growing up to be." My doctor was proud of me. And so I just learned at a really young age that being thin meant I was lovable and being overweight meant I wasn't. And this just spiraled into decades of eating disorders, eventually substance abuse to keep my weight down. And so at the end of the day, I just learned that I not to really like myself and to use all of these different coping mechanisms in order to kind of like escape from my inner pain, if you will. So I'm 21 years old. I'm addicted to cocaine and I'm an alcoholic, and I get kicked out of university and my parents make me move home and I get pregnant. And that baby saved my life because I could no longer use these substances anymore. But the number one thing where it all started was food, and that came back in full force. And so when my son was 9 months old, I'm like, I got to get down to the bottom of my eating disorder. I went back to school. I became a nutritionist. I graduated as valedictorian with first class honors. I was hired right out of school to work with a medical doctor. We built this beautiful obesity practice. We saw hundreds and hundreds of patients. And I'm handing out meal plan after meal plan, and nobody's getting any better, Because at the end of the day, Kathy, I really believe that we all know an apple is healthier than a chocolate bar, right? Like most people know that. But some people choose the chocolate bar anyways, over and over again, despite wanting or desiring to be healthy. And so I became really interested and passionate around why people do this, why people self-sabotage. And so I went back to school to pursue a master's and PhD, which I'm in the process of now, in behavioral psychology and understanding the human behavior and how it relates to our decisions and this self-sabotage kind of tendency. And through that process, I healed my own relationship to myself and food. And it was just so powerful. And you had to share it with everybody. So that's my practice in a nutshell.
That's a long story from beginning from when you were born almost to now.
Yeah.
Well, haven't you?
Yeah. Yeah. I think everybody's story starts right from the beginning, right? So,
yeah. So what are the most common issues or challenges that you encounter when working with clients regarding their relationship with food?
yeah, I think that it's not for lack of desire. Most people that I meet, I would even go as far as to say 100% of the people that come into my world genuinely want to be healthy. And yet they continue to make decisions that contradict with their goals. And so the hardest part for me and kind of the biggest barriers is for me to understand why the brain has developed programs of self sabotage or has developed coping mechanisms around food and helping to unpack those so that if the desire is to be healthy and lean, the decisions and the behaviors can match it more coherently. And I mean, it sounds fairly simple, I think, but the truth is it's not. And a lot of people really don't want to look that deep into understanding why they do the things they do. Also, food is a very, very interesting substance because we can't just be abstinent from it. Like we can't, like with alcohol, we can just never touch it again. But with food, we have to learn how to engage with it. And I don't want to live in a world where I can't have birthday cake, you know? And so it's like really being able to teach people how to be moderate with certain types of foods and allow them to have whatever they desire to tune back into true hunger and full signals. And if we can do that, then the body's not going to hold on to any weight. But it's an extensive process, right? It's not about the food at all. The food's just the coping mechanism. And it's about all the stuff underneath that leads people to engage in that destructive behavior.
Do you think it gets easier with time because as you eat healthier foods, you notice how you feel after you eat the foods that aren't so healthy?
I think that would happen even just with a regular diet, right? But if we're going to really look at the facts and talk about research, every diet you can engage in, whether it's keto, paleo, doesn't matter, intermittent fasting, doesn't matter. They all have a 98% fail rate. And the truth is, the dieting industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and yet obesity rates continue to rise, right? And so it's people when they come to me, like they've done many diets. They feel great after 3 weeks on keto. They're like, I don't even want the cake. But then something happens that like it's almost like it's not sustainable enough, or the brain goes back to the old programs. And so, I mean, to answer your question, I believe yes, it gets easier when we start to feel, oh, I actually don't feel good after these foods. But it's not as simple as just eat this and don't eat that. And it is a more complex, like psychological issue.
How do societal pressures and media influence individuals' perceptions of their bodies and eating habits? And how do you address these influences in therapy?
Yeah, well, this is a huge one. And I mean, it's no shocker that even in my parents' generation, like the desire to be thin and the dieting industry has really kind of brainwashed people into thinking that if they don't control or restrict themselves, then they're going to be overweight and they're going to lose control. And I want you to think about a ticking time bomb almost, right? Like a time bomb or a bomb needs to be under pressure in order to lose control, right? And so the more pressure we put on ourselves, the more we try and have control, the more restrictive we become, the more potential for loss of control. And so it's actually this very like almost self-fulfilling prophecy for the dieting industry that they convince us into thinking that if we just follow this diet, we'll be thin and then we'll be lovable. And for human beings, like, food, water, shelter, sex, et cetera, all the basic needs are important. But the number one basic need that supersedes all of those things is love and unconditional love. Because when we're born as babies, we can't go get food, water, shelter, sex ourselves. We rely on unconditional love in order to obtain those things. So our brain knows that when we are lovable, when we feel loved, when we're accepted, then we're safe. And it will seek that safety at all costs. So if safety and social belonging means we have to be in a size 2 pair of jeans, like we will do whatever it takes to get into those 2 pair of jeans. We'll inject ourselves with Ozempic. We'll go on these crazy restrictive diets. We'll run marathon after marathon and not replenish desperately so that we can feel the it's almost synthetic or like false sense of security, when in reality it's like killing us, right? And it's actually only feeding the process of weight loss and weight gain, this yo-yo dieting cycle.
A lot of times when we get to that size 2 or 0, we get there and it's like nothing's changed, right?
Of course. I see that so often. People always think, well, when I get thin, then I'll be happy. When I do this, then I'll be happy. It's like, no, no, no. Actually, you need to be happy in order to release the weight. You need to fall, like you need to put yourself out there in order for the weight to come off. You need to love your body in order for the body to feel safe enough to release what it doesn't need. It's not the other way around.
Right. Can you share some strategies or techniques that you commonly employ to help clients develop a healthier relationship with their food and their bodies?
Yeah. So the first thing that I think is really, it's kind of the baseline. Like we have to agree on this or the whole process isn't going to work. But, I have a daughter, she's a year and a half now. And no matter how much she loves cake or ice cream or whatever, when she's done, you can't overfeed her. Like there's no way. And so all of us are actually born with this very intuitive process of I'm hungry and I'm full. It doesn't matter if it's delicious. It doesn't matter. And so we just unlearn it growing up because people tell us, don't eat this, don't eat that. We go on diets, right? So we kind of disconnect from our true intuitive cues. So for me, step number one needs to be recognition and the belief truly that your body wants to be healthy. It's not working against you. And that if we tune back in to our true intuitive cues, we're not going to be overweight because that's the fear. People think if I'm not following a diet, then I'm going to lose control and I'm going to gain the weight. And that's just not true. So that needs to be step number one. The second thing is to, cravings are a very interesting topic because they're not always related to real hunger. They might just sound like hunger. When the brain feels a state of dysregulation, it never likes to feel uncomfortable. And so it's going to send you a cue to engage in a behavior that's going to turn off that dysregulation. And food physically turns off the stress response because from an evolution perspective, when we would find food, it would tell the brain I'm safe. So if you're like stressed out about work or family or whatever, the brain doesn't know the difference between financial stress, emotional stress, relationship stress, or running away from a bear stress. It's just chemicals that are dropped into your bloodstream. So the tendency is to reach for something outside of you to turn off that stress response. Now, so I would say that the second thing is being able to distinguish between true hunger and a craving. And I have a very simple exercise for this, actually. One thing that you can just ask yourself is when you hear that first cue, that first craving, you could just say, would I eat raw broccoli right now? And if the answer is no, then you're probably not hungry. And creating that awareness, I think, from the beginning, whether you decide to engage in the craving or not, at least you're aware of this is not hunger. This is not an emergency. And now you have the choice of I'm going to have something or I'm not, rather than being like motivated from the subconscious to just engage in eating. And the third thing that I would say, the last thing, is just really meeting yourself with compassion. Like you can't hate your way to a body you love. And I think that we're so hard on ourselves, especially as women. I'm generalizing, but that's my network as women. But, the tendency is to criticize ourselves. When you look in the mirror, if you're like, oh God, I need to lose weight, I look horrible. You think that would motivate you to go to the gym, but it doesn't. It does the opposite. It actually makes the body feel unsafe. So it tends to hold on to more weight. And then we want to self-soothe because we don't feel good about ourselves, right? So being able to meet yourself with compassion and love yourself to a body that you love is really kind of the pathway to get there.
Are there particular age groups or demographics that tend to struggle more with body issues? And if so, what do you think that is?
I think all women and some men, I just don't work with most men, but in every age group and demographic has their own cross to bear with this, truly. The majority of the women I work with are like 50 plus. And it's because a lot of them are going through menopause or premenopause, and the body changes a lot. And then all of these old thoughts and feelings from childhood that were ingrained in them start to come back. I have a lot of women, between ages 30 to 50 as well. But really anything under 25, I'm not even interested in working with that demographic. Not that they don't struggle, of course they do, but the desire to want to heal their relationship to food isn't strong enough at that point, because most of the time women kind of need to exhaust the dieting cycle in order to get to a place to realize this isn't working for me. I need another solution. And I think if it were as simple as like, oh, we just decide to love ourselves and as a teen, the desire to be liked or be thin is so much stronger than like, let me do the inner work, but every age group has their own like thing that they think about. And working with women in all types of ages, it's interesting to see like there's some generations that grew up with almond moms. So like some of them prefer low fat, some of them prefer high fat. It just depends on how they grew up in the narrative around dieting in that time.
Well, and once you get past 50, you have more of a likelihood to have real limits on what you can eat. If you have gut problems and things like that, where you can't eat everything that you see, it's more limited, right?
That's a really good point. And this is something that we address in the clinic as well. But, you know, the body itself is nothing without the nervous system. Like it's a shell. And so if you were to stub your toe, you don't even feel that pain until the brain tells you to feel pain, right? So the nervous system is the brain, the spinal cord, and the peripheral nerves that extend out in the body and communicate with the cells. So when the body has developed something like food intolerances or thyroid issues or hormonal imbalances, we don't blame the body. Like it's the nervous system that sent signals to develop that. And so in my practice, we do work a lot on the food psychology, but we also need to like heal the gut, deal with the hormones so that everything, when we balance the mind and balance the body, the weight comes off very easily. But it is this like dance that we have to do. We can't just ignore if there are like hypothyroidism or, dairy intolerance. Like you might not ever be able to eat a whole cheesecake yourself, but you should be able to have a slice of cheesecake and it not put you over the edge or on the toilet all night.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. How do you navigate the delicate balance between promoting healthy eating habits and avoiding triggering behaviors or thoughts related to disordered eatings in your clients?
Yeah.
I like the way you smile when you like the question.
It's a good one. It's a toughie. And it's a tough one both ways because I think I'm going to talk about the opposite of what you meant first, and then I'll go into what you said. But, the body positivity movement, though very powerful, can also be quite detrimental because, if somebody is extremely overweight, obese, like in the 300-pound or whatever, and they're walking around saying, I love my body. I love my body. It's like, but if you did really love your body, would you be self-sabotaging your body? Would you? And so I really want to make it clear that this isn't about weight loss or weight gain. This is about health. Like this is truly about finding the healthiest version of you. And when we do it from a food psychology perspective, you're never going to be underweight. The body's never going to manifest underweight or overweight. It's going to release what it doesn't need. And we're teaching the body how to burn the food that it needs and get rid of the rest rather than storing it for later or anything like that. And then also too, I'm sure you've felt this before, or maybe your listeners have, but when you feel really good about yourself, like you tend to make better choices. Like you tend to want the salad. You tend to want, and my goal is never to tell people you can't have this, you can't have that. I never say that. I just teach them how to love themselves so much that making the healthier decision is genuinely the thing that they want. And that's where we start to see the magic happen.
Very good. In your experience, how does the language we use around food and body impact individuals' mental health?
It's everything. It's the thoughts that we have about food. I've actually recently done a TED talk. So when it comes out, you'll hear me talk about this question. Yeah. But our thoughts are everything because remember that the body is nothing without the nervous system, right? So the thoughts we have send signals to the body. So there's a lot of research actually done on this topic. I'll reference one study. It's done by Leah Crum and her colleagues in Stanford in 2011, where they took two identical milkshakes and they labeled one highly caloric and they labeled the other low caloric. And then they measured biometrics of individuals who consumed them. So when the group consumed what they thought was the highly caloric milkshake, their body released a high level of hormones related to hunger as if they were drinking something that was highly caloric. When the group consumed what they thought was the low caloric milkshake, their body released a much lower level of hormones as if they were drinking something that was low caloric, but the milkshakes were identical, right? So it's like, actually, your thoughts about what you're eating can literally change the physiological response your body has. So if you're eating a donut and you're like, this is going straight to my thighs, like it is, you're telling your body what to do. And so, you can't just eat a Big Mac and be like, it's a salad. Like that's not going to work. The brain is smarter than that. But there is this happy medium where we stop shaming ourselves for what we're eating. And when we stop shaming ourselves for what we're eating, there's less of a likelihood that we're going to want to self-soothe or self-sabotage. So our diet changes, and so does our narrative around our diet. So, we can still eat that piece of cake and not feel like we need to burn it off tomorrow. We just forget about it. Because the only thing that is the difference between somebody who's listening to this who struggles with their weight or eating and somebody who doesn't is the way you think about food. Somebody who's never struggled with their weight or eating does not think about food in the same way. They're not like, oh,
Right.
look, they just don't think about it. Right. So, how we create that same situation for somebody else is by training the brain to not think about it truly.
What role does self-esteem play in one's relationship with food, and how do you work on improving self-esteem with your clients?
Yeah. So, this is kind of getting into when I said at the beginning, it's not about the food, right? It's about why you engage in self sabotaging behaviors or why you reach for that coping mechanism. So, self esteem plays a huge role. And, food is a really interesting thing because it's metaphorical for life. Like food is our life-giving substance. And so when we have issues with eating, overeating or undereating, it's never about the food. It's almost about our relationship of deservingness of life. And that's where self-esteem really comes in. Do we feel like we need to punish ourselves in order to be alive? Or do we feel like we need to earn it or like we're not worthy enough for it? And so to answer your question, how I deal with it is different for everybody, of course, but I think it really does come back to believing that, you're a special person and you have gifts and you're worthy of this life that you've built. And when we can get to that place, then there's no desire to really self-sabotage. Like self-love is literally the antidote of self-sabotage. And so when you can love yourself so much you don't want to hurt yourself, that's where we kind of build up that self-esteem.
Do you integrate mindfulness or other holistic approaches into your practice when addressing food or body image concerns?
Definitely. I run the mindful clinic. So
Yeah, I
um,
love the name of that.
thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So mindfulness is huge. And I actually incorporated, the mindful clinic many, many years ago. And it wasn't until this past fall that I actually studied mindfulness in its full effect. And it really blew my mind because it's the recognition around it's almost like this disassociation from our thoughts that we need to have. We need to observe ourselves from a third party perspective rather than identifying or fusing with our thoughts. It's not I'm bad, it's I'm having the thought that I'm feeling bad right now. Right. And when we can do that, when we can incorporate that mindfulness and in not making anything too like it's almost like not taking ourselves too seriously, or being intentional about things rather than just like autopilot automatic behavior through, we can really slow down and allow the consciousness, allow our desires to match with our behaviors. Because when we're moving so quickly, and I know if you're listening to this, you'll know I talk very, very fast. So if we're moving so quickly though, then we don't have time to really settle into what do I actually want? And is this behavior going to be productive for me? When we slow down and we can kind of not take our thoughts too seriously, we have this beautiful opportunity to like really make a decision. And I feel that more often than not with overeating behaviors, it's like blackout eating. Like they just black out and they're like, I don't even know where the food went. It's just food's all gone. And that tells me like you're so in this mindless eating place that if we just became more mindful, we would have the opportunity to make a better choice.
Right. How do you approach the topic of weight in your practice, considering its sensitivity and potential for stigma?
Yeah. And again, like everybody is different. I normally ask for people's weight or at least a measurement just because body dysmorphia is a very real thing. And I once had a client who she must have lost 30 pounds. Like she was unrecognizable, but she never stepped on the scale. She never measured herself in the beginning. And because the body dysmorphia is so strong, she genuinely convinced herself that like no weight came off. Like her clothes are falling off of her. And she's like, no, I'm still overweight. And so I do ask for like a starting point just so we can, from a neutral perspective, kind of track where we're going. But it's not about the weight. My best friend, I'm actually not at home right now. I'm here with her, but her ideal weight is about 20 pounds less than mine. And, we're almost the same height. We're both the same age. And so if I were to base my worth on what I saw on the scale and compare it to her worth, like, or her scale number, like, I would be obese. I would be, but if I were ever her size, like, I would look emaciated and need to be hospitalized. And so weight is really not of concern to me. It's more about, is the body healthy? How's the blood work? Is your body holding on to excessive amounts of weight? Because if it is, it means it's not healthy. The body wants to be healthy. In any given instant, it's doing everything it can to maintain balance to keep you alive. And so if it's holding on to a lot of weight, like, that's not adaptive for the body. The body, what's adaptive and healthy is for it to run away from danger as quickly as possible, to be fit. Right. And so if it's holding on to weight, it's my job to understand where are the imbalances so we can allow the body to release it. And there's no like number on the scale that it makes it right or wrong. I do not follow BMI. I'm technically overweight for BMI. So like it doesn't make sense, but it's, people know when they feel good. And when you do it from a food psychology place and you forget about the scale, even if you're 10 pounds heavier than what you thought you should be, if you really love yourself and you're healthy, most people don't care.
Inflammation is a big part of all of that too, isn't it? That, if you're in an inflammatory state, then it's usually unhealthy weight, right?
Totally. Yeah.
Can you discuss any emerging trends or developments in the field of food, diet, and body image psychology that you find particularly promising or concerning? Either
Yeah.
way.
Sure. Let's start with promising. So I really feel like people are starting to wake up. And I think that, a couple of years ago, I was like the only one talking about this. I was like the only one doing research and really like heart and soul pioneer in the industry because of my own history, not because like I'm smarter or better than anyone, but because I suffered so deeply for so long that I had to find a solution. Right. But I really feel like people are really starting to wake up and catch on to the fact that like diets don't work. It's very temporary. There is no magic pill. And at the end of the day, the more that we bully ourselves, the worse we feel about ourselves. Even if we do get to that size two, we don't like ourselves. And like, what's the point? We're still angry. We're still not enjoying life. And so I would say that this topic in general, just food psychology and the anti-diet culture is really starting to come up to the surface. And I'm very happy to see that. I hope everybody jumps on that bandwagon. I also think that subconscious reprogramming, like I'm a hypnotherapist as well. So I use quite a bit of hypnotherapy in my practice, but different types of subconscious reprogramming, whether it's RRT therapy or hypnotherapy or NLP or dream interpretation, that's starting to kind of make an uproar as well, because we're starting to realize that like our subconscious really does govern the show, right? So there needs to be a way that we tap into that. And mindfulness sometimes allows us to get there, but more often than not, we need to like actually get in and reprogram. So those are kind of the positive things that I see. And then some of the more negative, actually not more, very, very detrimental and very negative things are just more of these magic pill solutions. Like Ozempic is a disaster. And I think Oprah just actually went on and talked about it, and I love Oprah. And I was like so devastated because I think in a couple of years when she realizes like it's not just her, but she has a big audience, right? Like it's really dangerous when we're promoting that, this thing that we have to inject into our body is the solution of overcoming years of obesity. And I understand the stigma. Like I was obese as well. And you want out and you want a solution, but if you don't do it from the right way, if you add something or take something away, you're not actually dealing with the inner wounds that led to that in the first place. So obviously I'm functionally medicine trained. And so we see a lot of thyroid tumors, thyroid disorders, cancer, early death, early aging, and, liver failure with Ozempic. And so I think that a lot of people, like even young girls, are really starting to go to this like magic pill solution. And the problem is they'll have to be on it forever, which can lead to a lot of really undesirable side effects. And it's not solving the problem at all. So
Right.
like that would be my main thing where I'm just like, ugh, bummer.
Yeah. Do you, and if you do, how do you collaborate with healthcare professionals such as dietitians or physicians to provide comprehensive care for your clients?
Yeah, I have quite a few practitioners on my team, and because I'm just one woman, and I'm definitely not an expert at everything. And so I have a wonderful naturopath on my team. She's based in the U.S., but she works virtually. I really rely on her for some more tough cases, especially with just disorders that I've never really worked with. So, we have a naturopath on the team. We have a hormone specialist. I am constantly looking at blood work from endocrinologists and doctors. I worked with a doctor for many years, but I can't honestly say that like we have a very symbiotic relationship. I think it's more I'm requesting blood work and I'm interpreting it from my own perspective. And then if they're open to running blood work that I want to see, sometimes they'll be open to that. Sometimes they won't. And then also too, just like with whatever client I'm working with, if they need acupuncture or if chiropractic would be good for them, it's about finding somebody local in their area that can also facilitate that healing process for them.
Right. I know we're running over, so I've got one more question.
Right.
What are some practical tips or strategies individuals can implement into their daily lives to cultivate a healthier relationship with food and with their bodies?
Yeah. So the first one, I would say the broccoli test. It's very easy. Like we need to know the difference between craving and hunger. And even if you do act on the craving, it's okay. Just like create the awareness around it, right? So that would be the number one. The second thing would be, some type of mindfulness practice where we're just slowing the brain down. So for me, I meditate. I spent many years not meditating. Everyone told me I need to do it. It is only until the past 6 months that I've really taken meditation seriously, but like it's changed everything for me. It really has, just getting the mind into that meditative state. But some of my clients who don't want to meditate will do hypnosis. So whether it's hypnosis or meditation or breath work or yoga or just something that just calms down the mind at least once a day, a walk outside, really, really important. And you might not think that it's going to affect your eating, but it really, really does, because when we're in this hyperactive, hypervigilant beta brainwave place, it's really hard to make decisions because our body and our actions go immediately into subconscious programming. So if the automatic behavior is like to overeat or to blackout eat or to mindlessly do things, then you're not going to be conscious enough to do that. So that, and then the third thing, and this is one of my favorites, the little hack, but getting sunlight like directly into your eyes every single day. So, it's ideal when you first wake up in the morning and when the sun is setting, because there are different light spectrums that are available at that time. But if you think about our circadian rhythm, when we look at the sun as it's rising, not through glasses, not through the window, directly at the sun, it stimulates something called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is a part of the brain. And the eyes are actually a part of the brain. They just popped out of the skull one day. It's all connected. So it stimulates the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which actually resets all of the hormonal processes in the body. And hunger hormones are hormones, right? Leptin and ghrelin, they're hormones. And so when other hormones are out of balance, so are leptin and ghrelin. And it like regulating our sleep cycle as well, which is a huge benefit of sunrise and sunset exposure, is when we're going to regulate those hunger hormones. So I'm sure if you've had a bad sleep, you tend to crave more sugar or eat more, right? And that's because those hunger hormones didn't get a chance to regulate at night. So sun exposure, broccoli test, and any one mindfulness technique, even if it's 5 minutes a day, it would be my go-to.
The sun exposure, you said don't do it through sunglasses. Take your sunglasses. I'm going to do that tomorrow morning when I take my dog for a walk. I'll take my sunglasses off and look.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here with me today. I've learned a lot, and I know anybody that's listened to me has learned a lot too. You have a giveaway for our listeners called the Food Freedom Guide on your website, and we will link that below this podcast.
Love that. Thank you it was an honor. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to the show. If you liked what you heard, please give us a 5-star rating or review on iTunes.